Wyoming Territory, 1883, the wind tore through the plains just south of Buffalo like it had a bone to pick with the earth. And Evelina Carr held tight to the stagecoach door as if it might save her from the storm brewing behind her, not just ahead. Her wedding dress was stuffed in a sack under the seat, its lace already dirtied from the road. She had not looked at it since Cheyenne. There had been no time, only one thought: get away before Charles found her. Before he forced her to marry him with threats and a grip that left bruises in the shape of fingers on her arms. Evelina had answered his letter because she had no choice. Her uncle in St. Louis had lost everything in a fire and sent her away with $2 and a prayer. She thought she would be marrying a banker with a kind smile. What she found instead was a man who drank before noon and told her she was his property the second her boots touched his porch. She had lasted 5 days. The stagecoach jolted to a stop outside a weather-worn post office and general store. Evelina stepped down, her boots hitting the dry earth with finality. She held the sack close and looked around. The town was little more than a row of buildings and a livery stable. She had no plan past this moment. Evelina, her heart stopped. She turned slowly, nearly afraid her memory had conjured the voice. But there he was. Isaac Penmore. He looked older, broader in the shoulders and chest, his face lined deeper than when she last saw him at 17. But it was him. The boy who used to bring her wildflowers in a rusty tin pail when they were children in Missouri. The boy she had loved once so long ago it felt like a different life. "Isaac," she breathed. He stepped forward, his eyes moving over her face like he could not believe what he saw. "What are you doing here?" Her grip on the sack tightened. "I need help." He hesitated just a second, then reached for her gently. "Come on, let's get you inside." Isaac led her across the dirt road to a small house tucked behind the blacksmith shop, his house. It was clean but simple: wood stove, worn rug, and a rocking chair that looked like it had seen better years. A girl's drawing hung crooked on the wall. A second sat under it, half finished. Evelina's gaze caught on them. "You have a daughter, too," he said quietly, setting a kettle on the stove. "Eliza is 7, Emily is 5. Their mother died 3 winters ago." "I am sorry, Isaac," he nodded like he had heard the words too many times to let them in. "You are wearing a wedding dress." Evelina flushed. "I was supposed to be married yesterday." "I ran." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Was he hurting you?" She nodded. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he said nothing for a long moment. The kettle hissed between them. Finally, he pulled out a chair for her. "You can stay here. The girls and I have space." "You are safe now." She sat slowly, her hands shaking just enough to betray her. "I did not know where else to go." Isaac crouched beside her, his voice low and steady. "You came to the right place." The door burst open then, and 2 small girls ran in, boots thudding, cheeks pink from the cold. "Papa," the eldest shouted. "We saw a fox." Then they saw Evelina. The smaller one ducked behind her sister. The older tilted her head, assessing. "Who is she?" Isaac stood. "This is Miss Evelina. She is an old friend of mine, and she is staying with us for a while." Eliza, the older, stepped forward. "Do you like dolls?" Evelina smiled for the first time in days. "I do." The girl looked back at her father. "Can she help me fix mine?" The head fell off again. Isaac chuckled. "If she wants to." "I would love to," Evelina said softly. That night, after the girls were asleep and the house had gone quiet, Isaac poured 2 cups of tea and sat beside her by the fire. They said little, letting the silence between them stretch out like something familiar, comforting. After a while, he spoke. "I used to think about you after you left Missouri." Evelina looked at her hands. "I thought of you too." "Why did you not write?" "My uncle said I had to forget you, that I was too young to know my heart." Isaac sipped his tea, his eyes on the fire. "Do you still believe that?" "No," she whispered. "I knew it then, and I know it now." He looked at her, his expression unreadable, then he reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "You are safe now, and I swear no one will hurt you again." Evelina blinked hard, her chest tight with emotion. She did not trust easily anymore, but something in his voice, steady, warm, true, made her want to believe him. "Thank you, Isaac." He nodded, and for a moment they just sat together. Two people who had been broken and bent by life, trying to remember what it meant to feel whole again. Outside, the wind settled. The plains stretched on, quiet and wide, like they were holding their breath. By the end of her first week in Isaac's home, Evelina had learned to patch a cracked bucket, fold cornbread dough without wasting lard, and predict the moods of each girl by how they held their spoons. Eliza tapped hers when she was restless. Emily twisted hers around in circles if she was about to cry. Evelina never called attention to it. She just poured a little more syrup and waited until the silence passed. Each morning, Isaac left before sunup, boots crunching over frost-bitten soil as he headed east to work the line fence running along the cattle trail. The girls watched through the window until his shape disappeared over the ridge. "He used to whistle," Eliza said one morning, dragging her finger through her porridge, "before Mama died." Evelina didn't ask for more. She simply took the girl's bowl and refilled it, her fingers brushing a small, ink-stained drawing tucked in the corner of the table, a house with smoke curling from the chimney, and 4 stick figures holding hands beneath a cottonwood tree. The tallest was labeled Pa. That evening, Evelina stood outside the house, apron still damp from washing, and watched Isaac lead a limping bay gelding into the corral. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, his sleeves rolled to the elbow. He moved slow, talking low to the animal, steadying its flank with one hand while checking the leg. "You trained horses for the Rangers, didn't you?" she asked once he noticed her. He straightened, brushing hay from his palms. "Before I married Clara, yes, spent 3 years out of Fort Bridger. That was the last one I worked with. Name's Jasper. He's too old for the trail now, but the girls ride him around the pasture." She held out a length of binding cord. Eliza said the saddle strap's loose. He took it from her, nodding once. "I'll fix it before they notice." They stood like that for a moment, the breeze tugging Evelina's hair loose from its pins. She didn't pull it back. Isaac's gaze lingered. "I saw your name in the church ledger back in Missouri," he said finally. "I checked it for years." She turned toward him, surprised. "Why?" "I thought maybe your uncle would list a marriage or a death, something." He looked down. "When I didn't find anything, I stopped asking." "I wanted to write," she said, voice quiet. "But every time I tried, it felt like it would only make things worse." He watched the post. Isaac nodded slowly, as if that filled in a space he hadn't realized was empty. "You still play piano?" She shook her head. "Not since I left the city." "There wasn't one in the boarding house." "There's one at the church. It's old, but she holds her tune. Eliza sings. She'd love to hear you." It was the first time Evelina let herself picture something beyond the next day, not survival, but belonging. Music. Laughter in a space she hadn't yet touched. That night, Emily climbed into her lap without a word and fell asleep with her cheek pressed to Evelina's collarbone. Isaac didn't say anything. He just watched from across the room, his eyes unreadable, his cup cooling in his hands. Later, after the girls were tucked beneath quilts and the fire had burned down to coals, Evelina lingered near the hearth, folding an old flour sack into strips for kindling. Isaac leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I keep thinking I should ask more," he said. "About what you went through." She paused, then placed the folded cloth beside the others. "I don't want to remember him, not here. I understand." "I wasn't sure I'd ever feel safe again," she admitted, voice nearly lost in the crackle of the logs. "But when I saw you at the post office, the first thing I felt was relief, and then shame, because I ran to you without even thinking what it might cost." He stepped forward slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. "It doesn't cost me anything, Evelina." "Not a thing I'm not willing to give." She met his eyes. "That's what scares me." "I won't ask you to trust me yet," he said, "but I'll keep showing you why you can." She nodded once, and he didn't press more. They stood in the hush of the fire's glow until the last ember fell into ash. Outside, the stars wheeled over the prairie, endless and quiet. Inside, a woman whose heart had been broken by fear and a man whose life had been carved by loss stood in the stillness. both daring just barely to believe in warmth again. Snow fell in a hush that morning, soft enough to blur the edges of the fence posts and make the hills seem farther off than they truly were. Evelina stood at the window with Emily on her hip, both watching the world lose its color beneath the white. The child's breath warmed the glass in little bursts, her hand curled loosely around Evelina's braid. Isaac returned before midday, coat dusted with snow, cheeks raw with wind. He brought in a sack of flour from the mill and left his boots by the door without a word. Evelina noticed his left hand was wrapped in linen, a blot of red showing through. "You're hurt." "Barbed wire. I wasn't paying attention. You should let me clean it." He sat down without protest, eyes on the floor as she unwound the cloth. The cut ran across the pad of his palm, shallow but angry looking. She fetched the carbolic and gauze from the shelf behind the stove. "You were distracted." He nodded once. "I saw Jasper favoring the other leg. Might be time I put him out of his work. He's old, not useless." Isaac looked up. "You're right, I hadn't thought of it like that." She pressed the cloth gently against his skin. "Most folks don't." The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, only close. When she finished, his fingers lingered in hers longer than they needed to. That night, after the girls had gone to bed early from the cold, Isaac stayed at the table, sorting through a bundle of letters. Evelina was about to rise when he stopped her with a quiet, "This one's for you," she frowned. "For me?" It came addressed to the postmaster, care of me. "He must have assumed you were still around. The handwriting's familiar." She took it slowly. The paper was creased from travel, the ink smeared slightly on the edges. Her name was written in a slant she hadn't seen since St. Louis. She opened it with her thumb pressed tight against the seal. After reading the first few lines, she folded it shut and placed it on the table. Isaac didn't ask what it said. "Charles knows I'm here." He sat back, jaw tightening. "Did he threaten you?" "No, he said he forgives me." Her voice was flat. "That he hopes I'll come to my senses and return." Isaac didn't speak for a long while. Then, "He's not coming here. You don't know that. I know what I'll do if he does." She watched him across the table. "You'd risk that for me," he leaned forward, hands clasped. "I don't take in people just to let them be hunted." Evelina looked down at her lap. "I'm tired of being afraid." "You don't have to be." The oil lamp flickered. Evelina rose and crossed to the hearth, kneeling to tuck another log into the flames. Behind her, Isaac's chair creaked as he stood. She heard his steps but didn't turn until she felt his presence at her back. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You aren't." She turned. They stood close now, his shadow mixing with hers on the floorboards. "I never stopped loving you," she said, voice low, his breath caught. "I wanted to tell you that same thing for years." She reached up, touched the edge of his collar. "You don't have to say it. I know." He kissed her, then slow, sure, no trembling in it. Just warmth and the scent of wood smoke on his coat, and the quiet gasp that left her mouth as his fingers brushed her jaw when they parted. The fire crackled softly between them, and the world outside stayed quiet. "I'll write him back," she said. Isaac nodded. "I'll ride it to the post myself." In the bedroom, Emily stirred and whimpered once before falling silent again. Evelina moved to the door, paused, then looked back once more. "He doesn't get to decide what happens to me anymore." Isaac's face was steady. "No, he doesn't." And just like that, Evelina stepped into something she hadn't felt in years, her own life, shaped by her own hands. The storm was behind her now. Ahead, the snow kept falling, soft and clean. The days folded into each other quietly, like pages in a book Evelina had never meant to write, but now read with care. The snow lingered, crusting along the eaves and muffling the sound of boots outside. Inside, the house held a rhythm she hadn't known. She needed soft morning footsteps, a kettle set to boil, the rustle of dresses being fastened over woolen underthings as the girls readied for the short walk to school. Evelina had begun teaching them their letters in the evenings. The schoolhouse was too far for a daily walk in the snow, and Isaac hadn't yet hired anyone to take them through their lessons. So she filled that space. Eliza learned quickly, her fingers neat and sure even when the ink froze in the nib. Emily, younger and prone to distraction, sang the alphabet under her breath while stacking wooden buttons into towers. Evelina let her be. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed with bellies full of squash soup and cornbread, Isaac stayed seated at the table, a wrinkled map spread between his hands. His brow furrowed in thought as Evelina cleared the bowls. "What are you looking for?" she asked, taking the seat beside him. He tapped a spot near the Powder River. "There's land out there, low hills, good grass, I've been thinking. If I can put up a second barn by spring and start driving cattle that way come summer, there might be enough to keep the girls and you comfortable through next winter." She traced the faint penciled line he'd drawn, then looked up. "You'd move out there." "No, not move, expand." His eyes held hers. "I want something solid for them, for you if you'll stay." Her breath caught before she could stop it. "I didn't think you were making plans with me in them. I didn't expect you to arrive the way you did," he said. "But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't started seeing things different since." Evelina folded her hands in her lap, grounding herself. "I don't want to be taken in out of pity, Isaac, or because time's passed and we're both alone." His voice stayed low. "You think I'd risk this much for someone I didn't want beside me?" The map fluttered in a draft from the window. Evelina pressed it flat again with her fingers, heart thudding in her chest. "I had stopped imagining anything more than getting through the day," she said. "I hadn't," he replied. "Not once." She looked at him then, without fear, without apology. "If I stay, I won't pretend I'm the same girl you knew." "I wouldn't want her," he said. "You're stronger now and harder," he nodded. "So am I." In the quiet that followed, she reached for his hand. He let her take it, the warmth of his skin grounding them both. She didn't need promises. She needed truth, and he gave it to her in silence, in steadiness, in the way he didn't let go. The next morning, Eliza came running in from the porch with a blue jay feather clutched in her glove. "It was stuck in the fence," she said, holding it out to Evelina. "You should keep it, for luck." Evelina took it carefully. "Thank you." She tucked the feather into the seam of her journal, next to a pressed sprig of dried yarrow she hadn't meant to save but couldn't bring herself to throw away. It had been in her pocket the day she fled. That afternoon, Isaac hitched the wagon and took the girls to visit a rancher west of town who had promised a new calf. Evelina stayed behind, wrapped in a shawl and seated on the porch bench, mending a tear in Eliza's coat sleeve. She watched the sun creep across the yard, listened to the creak of the barn settling in the cold. When they returned, cheeks red and boots muddy, Emily ran to her with a fistful of pine cones and a story about a dog with one blue eye. Isaac followed slower, his smile quiet but sure. "We'll need stronger wheels if we're going to be hauling feed that far," he said as he passed. "But I've already spoken with the smith." Evelina didn't answer right away. She looked at the girls piling into the house, then back at him. "You're building something real," he nodded. "And I want you in it." She stood, the hem of her dress brushing the porch boards. "Then let's start." That night, as the fire burned low and the girls slept tangled together in a tangle of quilts, Evelina lit a lantern and set it on the table. She opened the ledger Isaac had left beside the map and wrote her name beneath his, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as something chosen. Outside, the snow had begun to melt in patches, revealing dark earth beneath. The thaw had come. And with it, the promise of something not just safe but lasting. The frost broke in early March, but the road to the east was still half mud, half rutted ice. Isaac spent the better part of 3 days hauling stone from the creek bed, laying it by hand to shore up the path leading to the barn. Evelina worked beside him, sleeves rolled, palms raw. She didn't ask to be spared the labor. He didn't offer. One evening, just before dusk settled, she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and watched as Isaac dug out the final patch by lamplight. His shirt was damp down the back, his gloves worn through at the fingers. She stepped down the stoop and offered him a tin mug of coffee. "You'll burn yourself out before the cattle even come north," she said. He took the cup and drank. I'm not used to having this much to look forward to." She leaned against the post, eyes on the hills. "Neither am I." The next day, they rode out with the girls to the old line shack west of the cottonwood stand. Eliza carried a quilt over her shoulders, and Emily balanced a tin pail of biscuits on her lap. Isaac let Evelina take the reins of his gelding, Jasper, riding beside her on the roan he'd raised from a colt. The shack was little more than weathered boards and a rusted stove, but Evelina saw past it. The way Isaac moved through the space measuring doorframes, marking the dirt with the heel of his boot, told her clearly this wasn't a stopgap. It was a foundation. "I was thinking," he said, tapping a spot on the southern wall, "if we frame another window here, you could see the river bend from the kitchen." Evelina brushed her fingers along the sill. "And if we run the stove pipe straight, there'll be enough draw to keep it warm through the coldest nights." He gave a small nod, then looked toward where the girls were racing sticks through the grass. "It won't be grand, but it'll be ours." She stepped closer, her hand finding his. "That's all I've ever wanted." They returned late, cheeks flushed from wind, their boots thick with mud. Evelina hung up the girls' coats while Isaac lit the stove. That night, she lay beside him for the first time, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over the scar on his palm. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. By April, the thaw gave way to green. Seedlings broke through the soil in Evelina's garden plot, and Isaac helped her build a frame for beans and peas. Eliza took to reading aloud in the evenings while Emily sketched birds on scraps of ledger paper Isaac had salvaged. The girls had begun to call Evelina Ma without prompting or correction. One morning, Evelina received another letter. This one bore her uncle's name. She read it at the table while the house was still quiet. When Isaac walked in from the barn, she handed it to him. "He's gone to live with cousins in Ohio," she said. "He enclosed a note, said he heard I was safe and happy. That he wouldn't trouble me again." Isaac folded the paper and set it on the shelf. "Do you believe him?" "I do." There was nothing else to say. The past, for the first time, had stayed where it belonged behind her. Spring brought the cattle, and Isaac made good on every plan he'd laid. With help from a neighbor and a pair of hired hands, he moved the herd to pasture and began fencing off the southern tract. Evelina kept the house, the girls, the garden. She played the church piano on Sundays and was asked once to teach the schoolchildren music. She agreed, so long as it didn't keep her from home too long. They married in May, under the cottonwoods near the line shack. Eliza carried a handful of prairie crocus. Emily wore a ribbon Evelina had sewn from an old dress hem. The preacher's voice was rough from the wind, but his words were clear. When he asked if Evelina took Isaac's hand with a free and willing heart, she didn't hesitate. "I do," she said, and meant it. They didn't hold a celebration, only a supper with stew and fresh bread, and a quiet moment after the girls had gone to bed where they danced slow in the kitchen to no music, but the settling of the house. They slept that night in each other's arms, the window cracked open to let in the scent of earth and grass and the long, gentle wind. Years passed, but they changed quietly. The shack grew into a home, one room added at a time. Chickens came, then goats. Isaac taught Eliza to ride, and Emily learned to carve birds from pine. Evelina kept her old journal on the shelf near the kitchen, the blue jay feather pressed between two pages where she'd once written, "I am not afraid, she never was again." And when the girls were grown, when the hills turned gold each fall and the wind carried only the scent of harvest, Evelina would rest her head on Isaac's shoulder by the fire and feel his hand close over hers scarred, strong, steady still. They were never rich in coin, but they were full in every way that mattered. Together, they built a life that held against every storm. A life made not from escape, but from choosing each other every day, and they never stopped choosing.